The Honourable, the Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this House here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen, Amen, Namaste.
Application of military language. Mr. Gobising, you can match that. You can match that representation, Dr. Gobising. So don't go there. Attempt to go there.
Oath or affirmation. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honourable members, I have received communication from Ms. Nicole Oliver, MP, member for Labrie, who has requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the member seeks is granted.
Bills brought from the Senate. The National Emblems of Trinidad and Tobago Regulation Amendment Bill 2018 in the name of the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. Petitions, papers, reports from committees.
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the second report of the Standing Finance Committee of the House of Representatives for the fourth session, 2018-2019, 11th Parliament, on the consideration of proposals for the supplementation of appropriation for the fiscal year 2019.
Prime Minister's questions, urgent questions.
Member for Oropouche East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, to the Minister of Works and Transport, could the Minister indicate the terms of reference and timeline for the completion of the probe by Justice Ralston Nelson into the contract arrangements between the Airport Authority of Trinidad and Tobago and Novo Technologies Limited?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the Minister of Works and Transport, as was stated at the post-Cabinet press conference yesterday in the clearest possible terms, the Cabinet has appointed Justice Ralston Nelson, Senior Counsel, as an investigator into the procurement of Novo Technology Incorporated Limited and the circumstances leading up to the entering into of the contract between the Airport Authority of Trinidad and Tobago and Novo. And we have asked that we will be asking him to produce his report for the consideration of Cabinet within the time frame of 2 months.
Supplemental, member for Oropouche East.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Could the Minister indicate the circumstances which would have influenced Cabinet to take this line of action?
Minister of Works and Transport.
To appoint Justice Nelson to undertake this probe. What were some of the matters would have led to that decision?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, again, as was stated yesterday in the clearest possible terms, there was a contract entered into between Novo Technology Incorporated Limited and the Airport Authority in December 2017, and it was supplemented in March 2018, and there were certain issues that when we took a look at it, there was a sub-cabinet committee of the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Works and Transport, and myself. When we looked at it, for example, the terms and conditions surrounding the payment of $510,000 US minimum per month, as well as certain circumstances as to how it was awarded in on a selective basis, as well as the fact that there were no financial provisions for the payment of these contract sums. Those are the main issues that concerned us, and as a result, we decided, look, rather than proclaim on this or us look at it any further, we should appoint an independent investigator and someone with the sort of weight and experience of Justice Nelson.
Supplemental member for Old Cheese.
Thank you, Minister. Bearing in mind that the Airport Authority is not under your purview directly, would you indicate whether or not this is an indictment on the minister with responsibility for the Airport Authority, bearing in mind that ministers must, as a duty, receive minutes of boards and all documents from their state enterprise under them so that they could ensure continuous oversight of business and of expenditure? And bearing in mind the nature of this matter involving what could be $300 million, would the minister be held responsible?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the whole purpose of appointing an investigator is for that person to delve deeper into this issue, to go and investigate it, to find the circumstances surrounding the procurement, etc. At this stage, it is an indictment on absolutely no one. And I'd like to point out that it was the Minister of Works and Transport who was the first one to draw it to our attention that there was something we needed to look at. But as I say, at this stage, there is an investigation that's going to be taking place, and we cast no aspersion or make no indictment on anyone until the completion of this investigation by the investigator.
Questions on notice, questions for oral answer.
Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam. Sorry. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are 8 questions for oral answer. We are asking for deferral of 4 questions. That is to say, question number 140, question number 178, 179, and 194. There are 2 questions for written response, and we will answer both questions.
Member for Point-of-View.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, question number 140 that is deferred again for this 3rd time. So it's over 6 weeks. So my question has been deferred. I would like to invoke Standing Order 2913, please.
Okay, so that in terms of member for Point-of-View, you have successfully invoked the standing order, and the Speaker will act accordingly. Member for Coover-South, I just would like to remind you that the session has started. Member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Question number 177 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the National Institute of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology, NIHUS, is not directly assisting with the building of the e-government portal. However, NIHUS has a role to play in building the digital economy. One, as an enabler, stimulating awareness of what exists in the e-business infrastructure and the types of e-businesses in the national economy. And 2, as an advisor to government, using its arm of policy and research to help government make informed decisions with respect to the areas that require government intervention, so as to strengthen the performance of the components that comprise the digital economy. To this end, Madam Speaker, NIHUS is conducting sectorial innovation and mapping studies in the ICT sector, the animation industry, and the software and web development industry. Thank you very much.
Supplemental member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Could the Minister indicate what is the time frame for completion of this e-government portal and subsequently the digital economy?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, it is difficult for me at this time to give a time frame for the completion of the e-government portal, especially as I said this morning that NIHUS is not involved in that. So perhaps with a little more research, we can give a more definitive answer at a later stage.
Supplemental, Member for Shigona cease.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Honourable Minister, might you be able to tell us what are the priority areas, about 2 or 3 or so, of the digital economy that you are focusing on?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, I indicated a while ago that some of these priority areas would be the ICT sector, the animation industry, the software industry, and the web development industry. These are the areas, the priority areas that I've spoken to just now.
Member for Oropouche East.
198, huh? Yeah. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Question number 198 to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there is no position entitled Chief Executive Officer at Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, which means it makes the other parts of the question redundant.
Supplemental, Member for Oropouche East.
Could the Minister be kind enough, therefore, to indicate what is the name of the title of the office holder and the office holder who exercise administrative authority, who is the head of the administration of this company?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Madam Speaker, if the member for Oropouche East is aware, Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited is a holding company on behalf of a group of companies. Holding companies normally do not have administrative staff. They are run by a board of directors with a company secretary and to some extent company secretarial staff. They are the owners of the shares of the operating entities. The operating entities are the functional companies. They set policy guidelines and coordinate the entire group. Caroni East, you can advise your colleague.
Supplemental, Member for Oropouche East.
Is the Minister indicating that there is no administrative head apart from a chairman of this particular entity?
Minister of Energy and Energy
It
Industries.
is run by a board of directors. There's a company secretary and a company secretariat. If and when certain support staff is needed, they are co-opted from the operating companies.
Supplemental. Member for Oropouche East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Question number 200 to the Minister of Finance.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Caribbean Airlines spent US $12,076,834 on promotions, advertisements, marketing, and sponsorship over the last 3.5 years, ranging from 0.6% to 1.6% of total annual revenue. Over the period, Caribbean Airlines focused on marketing initiatives that would improve passenger and ancillary services. In 2016, CAL spent US $2,720,732 for the following: merging the airline's loyalty programs to one loyalty management system so as to simplify customer experience, insourcing the loyalty call center, which resulted in a cost saving of US $1,056,018 over the period, and created a more seamless experience for customers through direct interaction with CAL sales representatives, launching a new website to improve the retail experience, and conducting a customer lifestyle survey, which resulted in a better understanding of CAL's customer segments, their purchasing behavior, and a more targeted positioning of advertisements. In 2017, CAL spent US $2,344,611, which resulted in converting the RBC CAL co-branded MasterCard to RBC Caribbean Airlines Visa Platinum Credit Card, which offers added value to customers in Trinidad and Tobago, contracting a new advertising agency for the company, celebrating the company's 10-year anniversary where customers were recognized and rewarded for their loyalty, increase enrollment in the Caribbean Miles membership program by 22% when compared to 2016. In 2018, CAL spent US $4,411,374 to launch a Hello Caribbean campaign. Hello Caribbean campaign, it's Caribbean Airlines after all, which showcased CAL's destinations and country attractions. The following new products were launched under this campaign. Launch new routes to Havana, St. Vincent, and New York. Launch a Caribbean Explorer package where customers can visit up to 5 islands on one fare. Launched an online platform for Club Caribbean and Caribbean Miles so that miles can easily be redeemed by customers. Launched a new Caribbean Airlines cargo website, which offers customers up-to-the-minute online tracking on shipments. Launched a new onboard experience such as Caribbean Plus, Caribbean Cafe, and onboard wireless entertainment through the Caribbean View application. Improved interline and e-ticketing agreement with Hainan Airlines so as to provide greater convenience for customers and cargo service between China and the Caribbean. Sponsored festivals and carnivals such as the Mashramani Festival in Guyana and the Jamaica Carnival. In 2018, CAL earned a significant return on their investment in promotions and advertisements, equating to revenue earnings before interest and taxes of US $14.2 million. CAL's investment also earned them the following awards: Caribbean's leading airline, Caribbean's leading airline brand, and an Addy Award from the Caribbean Advertising Federation. CAL's loyalty program continued to grow in 2018, increasing by 45,000 new members. During the period January to March 2019, CAL spent US $1,468,327 to launch its Caribbean Identity campaign. Under this campaign, CAL increased its paid social media advertisements, which reached over 5 million persons, generating a total of 9,230 ticket sales at a value of US $3,157,633.
Supplemental, member for Urupuchis.
Thank you very much. Minister, I took note that you chose to tell us in Trinidad in US dollars, and we did some quick maths. Minister, do you believe that this expenditure, which works out roughly to 8 million TT dollars per month that CAL is spending on sponsorship, marketing, and advertisement, do you believe that that is value for money?
Minister of Finance.
Firstly, Madam Speaker, the mathematics of the member for Oropouche East is very suspect and abysmal and bad. But what I can say is that when you look at the return on the investment in promotion and advertisement of $14.2 million, I can tell the honourable member and the public that that is equivalent to approximately 100 million Trinidad and Tobago dollars in increased revenue as a result of the advertising campaign under this government.
Member for Oropouche East.
The next question. Question number 201 to the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The estimated cost of construction of the proposed new headquarters building for the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs is $60 million.
For Urupuchis.
Could the Minister indicate the proposed location and the source of the source of funding for the $60 million project?
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM
Thank you,
Affairs.
Madam Speaker. I have a response in respect of the first part, 1 Lamy Street. The second part, that information is not available to me.
Member for Naparima, supplemental.
Could the Minister state why a headquarters was necessary, given the straitened circumstances of government and the fact that the ministry is already housed in fully furnished accommodation in Tower C?
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
The location where the ministry currently is housed Other uses are contemplated for that site. Consequently, the need subsists, and it is our intention to construct a new building. Thank you.
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills on the supplemental order paper, the Finance Supplementary Appropriation Financial Year 2019 Bill 2019 in the name of the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In accordance with Standing Order 64-1B, I beg to move that the next stage of the Finance Supplementary Appropriation Financial Year 2019 Bill 2019 be taken on Monday, the 13th of May, 2019.
Minister, could you indicate at what time, please? Time.
Oh, I'm sorry, at 1:30 p.m.
Honorable members, the question is that the next stage of the Finance Supplementary Appropriation Financial Year 2019 Bill 2019 be taken on Monday, May 13, 2019 at 1:30 p.m. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
Motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister. Public business, private members' business. Motions.
Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas the World Economic Outlook, published by the International Monetary Fund, projected that the Trinidad and Tobago economy is stagnant, and whereas this is at variance with the assertions of the Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister, and other government spokesmen on the subjects of growth and economic performance over the past 2 years, and whereas the economic experience of the majority of citizens is one of distress and concern, the psychological state of workers is one of anxiety and fear, and many among the middle class are challenged to meet their mortgage payments. And whereas oil production is at its lowest level of production now in decades, and whereas the negotiation of natural gas prices with producing companies has created new problems for the National Gas Company and the downstream sector and may affect national policy choices in the immediate future. And whereas the local private sector is hesitant to invest in the local economy and small and medium businesses are struggling to stave off closure, and whereas the depletion of foreign reserves is occurring at a net rate of $1.6 billion annually, and whereas after 3.5 years in office, the government seems unable to manage the economy effectively, citizens of all dimensions are under stress and live with daily uncertainty, and the country as a whole seems rudderless and directionless, be it resolved that this House condemn the government for its recklessness and mismanagement of the finances and economy of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, the purpose of this motion, you want a second? The purpose of this motion is to condemn the government led by Prime Minister Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley for its recklessness and for the mismanagement of the finances and the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. Responsibility for the mismanagement of the finances and the economy of Trinidad and Tobago rests on the shoulders of the Minister of Finance, the representative for Diego Martin Northeast.
the custodianship of the finances and care for the economic fortunes of Trinidad and Tobago have not, in my view, been prudent. There is also evidence of a fair amount of incompetence in the mismanagement of the alignment necessary between monetary policy, fiscal policy, and economic policy. This is evidenced by the most reliable numbers available, Madam Speaker, at this time, from credible sources which strongly contradict pronouncements and words from government sources, as well as the lived experiences of citizens in every walk of life. Madam Speaker, everything that the Minister of Finance has said in Parliament sought to promise a stabilization after the dramatic fall of oil prices in January 2015, and following that 3.5 years following the 3.5 years which have passed, we were supposed to be on the road to recovery, growth, and a more buoyant economy. Let's take the themes of his budget statements in this honorable House so far. In October 2015, the minister spoke about restoring confidence and rebuilding trust. Let's do it together. That was the theme of his 2016 budget. Now, that would have been a very difficult budget for the minister, I want to concede. They had just come into office, and they would have had to formulate a budget in a situation in which things were financially tough because of the fall in oil prices. In that year, the growth rate was minus 6.5%, according to the IMF and the central bank review of the economy. So if we are to concede that 2016 would have been a transitioning year for them, and to make some allowances for that, we had the September 30th, 2016 budget, Shaping a Brighter Future, a blueprint for transformation and growth, and that would have been for this 2017 budget. And at that time, the IMF economic outlook indicated at the end of that period that we had a growth rate of minus 2.6, and the central bank gave us a growth rate of minus 1.9. I think it is fair to say that based on that budget, we did not see, in fact, the shaping of a brighter future, and we did not have a plan or a blueprint for transformation and growth. And in fact, we did not, in fact, see growth in that particular year. The next year, the position of the minister was to make the case for a paradigm shift, changing the paradigm, putting the economy on a sustainable path. I think it is fair to say that what we got was more of the same, and we have not seen the economy go on a sustainable path. We've seen a continuing dependence on the energy sector, more particularly the natural gas sector. We've seen very little diversification or growth in the existing sectors outside of energy. And basically, there was no paradigm shift, there was no attempt, or there was no result in putting the country on a sustainable path. A sustainable path would have meant that things would have been initiated which had the capability of renewing itself and which had the capacity of regenerating itself as we went forward. In October 13, the last budget that was presented in this House, which is the 2019 budget, the theme of the budget was turnaround. And I think despite many tries by the minister, besides many statements by him and others, we have not been able to feel any turnaround yet. In between, we had 3 mid-year reviews on the 8th of April 2016, the 10th of May 2017, the 10th of May 2018. But all we've had, in spite of the several budgets and the mid-year reviews, is in fact economic stagnation, an economy in the doldrums with citizens of all dimensions living under stress and uncertainty beyond the normal set of uncertainties that we have come to expect with contemporary life. Our country as a whole seems rudderless and directionless, and after 3.5 years of financial and economic mismanagement, and the available numbers make that clear in terms of where our country is now and where Trinidad and Tobago is headed. Madam Speaker, as I was preparing for this debate, I received the release yesterday of the central bank, in which it recorded a growth in 2018 of 1.9%. And the reason I say that I was surprised by the release and to some extent alarmed when I look at the numbers is because the numbers defy credibility. The central bank says that according to the CSO projections published in the 2018 review of the economy, real gross domestic product, or GDP, increased by 1.9% in 2018 on account of expansion of the energy sector, 2.4%, and flat growth in the non-energy.
There's a lot of crosstalk and conversation going on in the chamber, and I find it quite disturbing. I will remind all members of Standing Order 53. Minister of Finance, I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to speak in this debate. Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you. As I was saying, I found that the 1.9 figure from the central bank lacks credibility, defies credibility, and that this was based on their assessment of an expansion of the energy sector, 2.4%, and flat growth in the non-energy sector of 0.0%. Now, the 2018 review of the economy, Madam Speaker, would have covered the year 2017. I want to make that clear. The 2018 review of the economy would have covered the year 2017. Now, any pronouncement on 2018 would have been a mere projection. In this particular case, by the CSO, as recorded in the review of the economy, a projection of 1.9%. And in September 2018, Madam Speaker, that projection could not have been based on numbers beyond the period January 2018 to June 2018, the first 6 months of the year. To come here, therefore, in 2019 May, and say that the real GDP increased by 1.9% as a definitive statement is something of a stretch. And it explains why this Minister of Finance, who has, at least within the last year and a half, succeeded in damaging his credibility over the numbers, and is now seeking, in my view, by this particular instance in which the central bank committed itself in this way to damage the credibility of the central bank or any other institution simply because he wants to achieve certain political objectives, I think.
And member for Bhoendradatt Tewarie, please exercise some restraint. Member for Caroni Central. I'll ask you to withdraw that. It's imputing improper motives, and withdraw it. You could restate whatever you wish in a more acceptable way, and we can move on.
Okay, I withdraw, Madam Speaker, but I was making the point that when you use numbers like that to stretch the credibility of the reality that you have before you, because I will show what the numbers are in the central bank report itself, then it really undermines the integrity of the system here for data and for information. I want to say that I am very disappointed in the governor of the central bank. Because the governor of the central bank is meant to be an independent person.
Sorry.
Member for Caroni, Central. Again, I'll ask you to withdraw that. I would not allow that. Making certain statements against somebody that is not here to, who's not here to defend himself. But I am sure, as an experienced politician, a teacher, a debater, and so, you can find what you need to say in a more acceptable way. So please withdraw, and you can press on.
Okay. Madam Speaker, I would say that I expect the central bank to be an independent institution. And because of that, I'm very disappointed in this report by the central bank. Now, I have the numbers here for the various institutions, and they cover the year 2015 to 2020, in other words, up to the projections of 2020. I have the numbers for the review of the economy, and that is taken from page 1 of the review of the economy. I have the numbers from the IMF Article 4, 2018, and that is page 9 of the Article 4. I have the numbers from the World Bank Global Economic Report 2019, and that is from page 232. I have the Prime Minister's Mind Your Business speech, and this is taken from a transcribed version from page 6. I have the IMF World Economic Outlook 2019, and the numbers are taken from page 161. And I have the Central Bank Annual Economic Survey, which is taken from table A1. And when you look at the numbers for 2015, and you go across the board in all of those institutions that I mentioned, institutions and individuals that I mentioned, in 2015, you see 1.8, 1.7, 0.6, 1.9, 1.9, 1.8. Relatively close numbers for the same year in all of the institutions. 2016, minus 6.5, minus 6.1, minus 6.1, minus 6.5, minus 6.5, minus 6.5. Generally, 6.5 seems to be the number that everybody agrees upon. 2017, minus 1.9, minus 2.6, minus 2.6, minus 1.1, minus 2, minus 1.9 again. And in 2018, minus 1.9, 1, 1.9, 0.3, and 1.9. And the numbers continue like that for 19 and 20. And the point that I'm making is that generally these institutions agree because they use the same data stock. They generally use the Central Statistical Office information, and they draw on other sources of information. In some cases, for the projections, they use models, and sometimes in the calculation of the various elements that contribute to GDP in any year, they also use certain models. So, Madam Speaker, there is no reason why there should be a fight or a quarrel about growth numbers in a country. But the situation in Trinidad and Tobago is compounded by the fact that the Minister of Finance, by his own admission, at a press conference when he said he received 2 emails from his permanent secretary or some member of his office in the Ministry of Finance, indicated that the original numbers, -1 for 2018 of the World Bank and 0.0 for 2019 of the World Bank, were now changed to 0.7 and 0.5 respectively. Now, that is why the surprise, in my view, growth numbers of the central bank, confirming a projection that could only have been made on the basis of the first 6 months of 2018, and based on the central bank report annual economic survey, there was no new data that was provided. It was difficult for me to see how they can confirm that 1.9 for 20, which was given in the year 2017, basically the 2017 numbers as a projection. So let me look at the annual economic survey, which is the central bank document, which came out yesterday, Madam Speaker. And when you look at it, you begin to see that I have had occasion to say in this Parliament, Madam Speaker, that when you read the central bank's report and you hear the minister's statements, it's almost like the central bank governor is walking on eggs to try not to get into a conflict with the Minister of Finance. And here it is.
Again, I'll ask you to rephrase that. There is a certain... Remember, there's a certain imputation in what you have said that I would not allow. So if you can retract that and you can rephrase and continue with your contribution.
Okay, Madam Speaker, I will retract and rephrase. In this document, although the central bank records the 1.9% for 2018, it says in the next paragraph, however, crude oil production, rig days, and depth drill continued to decline. So it shows what is happening in the oil sector of the economy. It says that liquefied natural gas production was strong, and it gives the number 13.5%. And it says it's reflective of the recovery from the maintenance, etc. But in contrast, the production of natural gas liquids fell by 11.3% as yields are being affected by the extraction of increasingly dry natural gas. Then he talks about the closure of Petrotrin and how that has affected the economy. And then he talks about the downstream to the natural gas sector. The output of urea fertilizer output was adversely affected by increased downtime at 2 ammonia plants, CNC and Tringen 2. Methanol output dipped because of maintenance activity at the M5000 facility in October 2018. Then he talks about the sales of cement declined by 2.7. He says this business services sector was held back by less buoyant activity in this commercial bank sub-industry. He says lower domestic demand affected activity in the manufacturing sector. He says manufacturers continued to operate with the lowest level, with considerable, spare capacity, producing at 66.4% of their capability over 2018, which was the lowest since 2014. The food and drink and tobacco subsector saw a particularly sharp fall-off and then he goes on transport, communications, etc. So what the governor of the central bank is doing, what the central bank professionals are doing is, although it seems that they have been commandeered by the Minister of Finance to write 1.9.
Standing order 48.6, please.
And member for Caroni Central, I'll have to support the objection. I'll ask you to withdraw that. Rephrase in a way that is acceptable, and you can continue.
Okay, Madam Speaker. So the central bank went along with the Minister of Finance in recording the 2017.
It's been withdrawn? Yes. Yeah, it's been withdrawn. Okay. Yeah.
To record the 1.9, but when you look at the numbers here, in addition to the narrative, you see energy sector 2.4, non-energy sector 0.0, agriculture, forestry, and fishing minus 15.6, trade and repairs minus 2, construction minus 3.3, financial and insurance activity 1.1, and so on. So I think that the central bank is trying to be authentic, trying to use the best numbers that it can that are authentic and real, but at the same time, they are hampered by the fact of the insistence that the numbers from the CSO recorded in the 2018 review of the economy are the numbers that have to be used. Madam Speaker, in the 12-month period, March 2018 to February 2019, Petrotrin's core production fell by 23%. This does not include any third-party production. In the 12-month period, March 28 to February 2019, Trinmar's production also fell by 24%. Reversing these trends require investment in drilling. And the question that arises, which I hope the Minister of Finance will answer, is where is Heritage Petroleum going to get the financing from to do this kind of drilling? We are dealing here with the lowest production numbers in terms of number of barrels for Petrotrin. We have seen the steepest decline in the petroleum sector in Trinidad and Tobago. And Madam Speaker, when you look at the Central Bank report of January 2019, which covers the same period, 2018, you also see here on page 14 a recording of all the declines that took place outside of the energy sector. So that the Central Bank is very careful to try to give the population the correct numbers. But somehow you find a situation which is anomalous, in which the gap between what the facts of all the details tell you and what the growth number is, there is one big dissonance about this number. Now, this is not the first time the Minister of Finance was quarreling about the growth numbers this time, but this is not the first time he's been doing it. You would remember, Madam Speaker, that he came here and talked about the maxing out of the overdraft by the People's Partnership in 2015. He was wrong at that time, as I will show. He quarreled with the Energy Minister and the energy technocrats over numbers submitted to a rating agency. Today, the Energy Ministry has stopped providing numbers, at least not to the general public. The minister also had a big quarrel with me in this house. When we had a debate, the last time we had an economic matter here, in which when I used the same January 2019 data covering 2018, he said that those were the wrong numbers and that the official numbers were the numbers from 2017 in the review of the economy. I already used the example of the changing of the World Bank numbers. I see there is a revision of outlook by the IMF here, but they were much more cautious. I said previously that it is unlikely that the IMF would change their mind. And this is what they said on the question about our forecasts and projections that were published in the April World Economic Outlook. They were based on information that was available as of early March, including data provided by the authorities and published information from official institutions in TT. And again, the team will update those estimates in the context of the July World Economic Outlook update using information available that should take us through to early June. So everyone who disagrees with the minister, he quarrels. I'm sure the minister probably told the central bank that they could only use the numbers from the review of the economy, because that is something that he claimed here that was that had to be done. And we will see whether the IMF will revise their numbers and whether they will come back here for to do their economic report. As of now, the World Bank, the IMF numbers stand minus 0.6 and minus 1. And here, minus 0.3 and 0.0. I simply want to close this part of my presentation, Madam Speaker, by quoting from page 133 of the statistical appendix of the World Bank Economic Outlook, in which they say, Trinidad and Tobago's growth estimates for 2018, that is based on their 0.3 number and their 0.0 number for 2019. Trinidad and Tobago's growth estimates for 2018 are based on full year energy sector data from the Ministry of Energy and Ministry of Finance, preliminary national accounts data for the first 3 quarters of the year from the Central Statistical Office, and staff projections for the 4th quarter non-energy output based on available information. Growth estimates are subject to revision once the finalized data for the full year becomes available, and that is standard practice when you're dealing with statistical matters. Now, I have a speech here that was made to the day 1 year ago by the Minister of Finance. And he made it in this House on the 10th of May, 2018. And at that time he said, Madam Speaker, after a long and discouraging period of economic decline, we are now witnessing a welcome upturn. Early estimates are indicative of a growth forecast of 2.0% in 2018 and 2.2% in 2019, rising to 2.5% in 2020. And this is the problem with the numbers, Madam Speaker, which is that the minister projected certain things, and instead of coming to the parliament, coming to the country, and said, look, we didn't meet what we projected, and here is why, let us explain what it is. He is prepared to manipulate the numbers in order to argue with those who provide the numbers.
Order 48.6, please.
Member for Caroni Central, I uphold the objection. Please withdraw and proceed.
I will withdraw. He is prepared to argue with everybody, no matter what is the level of their independence, in order to ensure.
Madam Speaker, that implies the same thing.
What's that?
And I raise Standing Order 48.6 again.
And I, again, Caroni Central, in the context of the point you're making, I have to uphold the objection.
Thank you very much. I withdraw, Madam Speaker, and I say the Minister of Finance in Trinidad and Tobago is right, and everybody else in the world is right.
Finance, right. 48.6.
So, Madam Speaker, we have a challenge in oil production. We had an alleged corruption scandal over the fake oil issue, which in implications has to do with the fact that oil may have been counted that was not there and was paid for. Since then, we've heard that that matter is in arbitration. We've heard from the Prime Minister in this House that it was before the DPP. We have heard from the DPP in the public realm that it is not before here. But the end result is that we have a problem in the oil sector. In natural gas, we have a problem, Madam Speaker. The supply to, we have a problem. Is this the, ma'am, can I ask you when my time will be complete?
The time is complete at 2:36:53.
That's my total time.
Your total time.
Okay. So I would say in the gas sector, we have a big problem, which is that the Prime Minister went to Houston based on his negotiations here, based on his report to the Parliament. He indicated that he had done some negotiations. The end result of that, Madam Speaker, is that we now have a situation where the price of natural gas from the producers to NGC is higher than it was. I don't want to say the number, I do not know it. That higher number makes it difficult for NGC to purchase at that price and to be able to honor the contracts downstream at the lower prices for which those contracts were written. So that NGC is in a bind. It is now taking only some of the gas from some of the producers, and it is running at a loss with some of the contractees in the downstream sector. And, of course, the others in the downstream sector who do not have contracts, where they had contracts to be renewed and have not yet been signed, those people are in a tizzy because they do not want to renegotiate contracts that would raise the cost of gas for them. So we have a problem in which the oil companies, the producers, the gas producing companies are satisfied. NGC is in a bind, the downstreamers are in a bind, and the future of the natural gas industry and what we do with it, we have reached a kind of crossroads. So the issue for us is really, we may have to decide the extent to which we continue to proceed downstream. There is another matter with that, which is that many of the downstream companies, based on the price differentials now, are going to become uncompetitive. And this is not me saying so, this is the Minister of Energy implying so in a statement that he made recently. And if you have that, it means that you have a danger with those industries continuing in Trinidad and Tobago. Because of the limits of my time, I will simply read some of the headlines of some of these. Energy Minister, downstream sector under pressure, Business Guardian 10/05/19. Non-energy sector needs help, Trinidad Guardian 10/05/19. NGC facing difficult financial times, Energy Reporter in the Trinidad Guardian. NGC buying less natural gas from BPDT and so. So the end result is that, remember, we are an energy dependent country. Nothing else is growing in the country. And the gas sector is the growing sector. And we have a challenge everywhere else in the economy. So the challenge may well be not whether we have had economic growth and what is the growth of the economy and whether we should quarrel about it. But the challenge may well be, Madam Speaker, what are the prospects for growing the economy going forward? Because if you have a problem with oil, you have a problem with natural gas, you have hard policy decisions to make about the future of natural gas and how it will be used in this country, and there is no growth in any other sector and no attempt at diversification or economic restructuring or transformation, I think that we are going to be in a problem. And the question may well be, where is the growth going to come from if we don't restructure, diversify, and transform the economy? And I want to say that not to the members opposite, who may know it and perhaps do not wish to address it at this point, but to the population. I want to say to the population that this is the dilemma, not whether it is 0.3 growth or whether it is 1.9 growth or whether it is 2% growth. The issue may well be whether this economy has the wherewithal, given what is happening now with oil, given what is happening with natural gas, given what is not happening in the rest of the economy, whether this country has the wherewithal and the time, if we proceed as we're proceeding now, in order to have the capacity for growth and for sustainability going forward. Because what is the plan, Madam Speaker, for this government? What are the priorities? How is that related to the fiscal allocations that are given? How is it related to the development program in each year? This year we saw that all the money from the Infrastructure Development Fund, most of it anyway, went in fact to be paying for the closure of Petrotrin. What is the space in the country for private sector confidence and growth if the government is borrowing so heavily both internally and externally? What is the opportunity for diversification, for investment, for job creation, prosperity, and sustainability? So, Madam Speaker, I know that I have a very short time here, and I don't have the time to get into the numbers. I'm sure the minister will deal with that when he speaks on the Monday opportunity when he comes to account to this Parliament for the mid-year review. But the end result is that we have continuing deficits. True, it's getting smaller. We have growing debt. We have a problem with the exchange rate and the demand for foreign exchange and the impact it is having on business and ordinary citizens. And we have a situation, Madam Speaker, in which the country just cannot feel that they can be hopeful or confident about where the economy is going, where the country is going, and how secure they are in the economic system in Trinidad and Tobago. And none of the interventions of this government have worked. If I ask the question, there were agricultural incentives that were brought here and passed in the budget. What has been the impact on agricultural production in Trinidad and Tobago? There were incentives that were given and offered for housing. What has been the impact, Madam Speaker, on housing construction? There was an export allowance brought here for the Exim Bank facility. Here we see the report of the central bank put out yesterday, 66% capacity, and that they are going at that level because the economy outside of energy has contracted, so that they cannot, it doesn't make any sense. What about the tourism incentives that they offered? How many more tourists have come over the last year or the last 2 years? So the incentives, the interventions in the economy have not worked. And we have a challenging situation in this country. I will mention just a few of them because I have just a few minutes more. We have an aging population and a very low labor participation rate of just over 59% in this economy, in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a problem with job creation when it comes to this government and the extent of not just unemployment, but underemployment in the country. And the unemployment is causing extreme distress. Anybody who's a representative in a constituency knows by talking to their constituents how bad it is wherever you live in Trinidad and Tobago. There is a growing public debt and a persistence of fiscal deficits. The central bank said that productivity has improved a little, but we have a problem with labor productivity, and we have a deteriorating ease of doing business situation in Trinidad and Tobago, where confidence is almost shot. We have economic certainty and lack of clarity on the direction in which our economy is headed. We have this foreign exchange crunch, which is affecting everybody. If you want to get $200 in the bank, it's difficult. If you want to get $100,000, if you have a manufacturing enterprise, it's a problem. If you are a retailer or distributor and you want a $200,000, you can't get it. It's very difficult. And this is going to have, and this is compounded now, Madam Speaker, by the changing demographics in the country because of the migration from everywhere. Venezuela is just one, but there is a migration climate emerging in Trinidad and Tobago, which, if not managed, is going to get us into trouble. We don't have any problem with migration, but we believe in managed migration. You must know who you're coming in.
Honourable Member, your speaking time is now spent.
I beg to move, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I beg to second the motion and I reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Honourable members, the motion being seconded, I shall now propose the question for debate. Be it resolved that this House condemn the government for its recklessness and mismanagement of the finances and economy of Trinidad and Tobago. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Having listened to that presentation from the member for Caroni Central, which was replete with unfair and unfortunate attacks on the central bank and its staff, clearly because the publications of the central bank over the last couple of years have upset the member for Caroni Central and his colleagues. If the central bank was preaching doom and gloom, I am certain he would embrace the publication of the central bank. But, Madam Speaker, I was told that what I should do in response to this motion, which takes as its first recital and its point of departure the following statement: whereas the World Economic Outlook published by the International Monetary Fund projected that the Trinidad and Tobago economy is stagnant, what I was told, Madam Speaker, that my response to this entire motion should be one page. Yesterday, Madam Speaker, the International Monetary Fund held its regular press briefing, and in that press briefing, the Director of Communications for the IMF, Mr. Jerry Rice, gave an update on a number of countries around the world, and this press conference, Madam Speaker, is available on the IMF website, and I actually have a transcript and a video, Madam Speaker, and we're talking about yesterday. And yesterday, the International Monetary Fund chose to publicly make statements about a number of economies around the world, including Argentina, the Republic of Congo, Sri Lanka, and a number of other countries, Madam Speaker. And what I will read, which is what I was told, I should just read this statement made by the IMF, not by me, not by the maligned central bank that the member has chosen to disparage, but by the International Monetary Fund. After it spoke about the USA, China, Argentina, Sri Lanka, and so on. At the end of the press conference, it decided to take questions. And at the end of the press conference, the IMF Communications Director had this to say. Yesterday, there's one more question that I'll take online. And that is from Trinidad and Tobago. How do you see the near-term growth prospects for Trinidad and Tobago? And then there's a longer question which relates to, does the IMF have any comment on the statements made by the finance minister who had questioned the validity of the fund's growth estimates for 2018? This is what the IMF had to say. Mr. Jerry Rice, Communications Director of the IMF. Broadly, the outlook for Trinidad and Tobago. We believe it has started showing signs of improvement from the second half of 2017. Oh, no. Let me repeat that. Oh, no. This is the IMF speaking. And Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I didn't make any noise when they were talking. I am asking for your protection, Madam Speaker.
Okay, so I think everybody will comply with Standing Order 53. Please proceed, Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know these kind of things hurt them because we are a serious government.
The world sees us that way.
And the world sees us that way. And this is what the IMF has to say yesterday, broadly on the outlook for Trinidad and Tobago. We believe it has started showing signs of improvement from the second half of 2017. And it is estimated to have actually returned to positive growth in 2018. That's what the IMF had to say. Not the member for Currently Central and his cohorts, Madam Speaker. That is the Communications Director of the IMF in a live press conference in Washington yesterday. And Madam Speaker, so it's not Imbert say so. It's not PNM say so. It's not CSO say so. It is the International Monetary Fund say so, that the economy started to improve in 2017 and returned to growth in 2018. And I would also like to, so I was told I should just read that and sit down. Because this entire motion is predicated on a fiction. A fiction. Madam Speaker, the member for ParlView is screaming at me. I beg your protection.
Well, you know, Minister of Finance, you have a way of creating excitement on both sides, okay? But I would like to hear the presentation by the Minister of Finance, and I'll ask all members to remember the low ceilings and be mindful of the volumes, control the cross talk. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also would like to read into the record a publication that is on the World Bank website, April 19, 2019, last month. As part of its forecasting estimates, the World Bank estimates for real GDP growth in Trinidad and Tobago for 2018 have been revised from -1% to +0.7%. This revision takes into account recently released data of quarterly sectoral GDP, non-energy production in the last quarter of 2018, indicating a faster pace of economic activity than previously estimated. It's not me talking, Madam Speaker. This is the World Bank talking. And updated figures for the 2018 annual oil and gas production. Accordingly, the country's 2019 World Bank forecast has been revised from -0.5 to +0.9%. So according to the World Bank, the Trinidad and Tobago economy is not only growing, it's growing at a faster pace than originally anticipated. According to the IMF, the economy started to improve in 2017 and returned to growth in 2018. So that's the answer to this motion. But I think it's necessary to educate the population because the member for Caroni Central placed a number of complete untruths and fictions onto the record. Let me deal with the first one. He said with great aplomb that the Ministry of Energy is no longer publishing data on its website. That is a colossal untruth, Madam Speaker. A colossal untruth. If you were to go right now, Madam Speaker, onto the Ministry of Energy website, you would see in bold that the Ministry of Energy has published oil and gas production figures for as current as February 2019, Madam Speaker. January 2019, February 2019. All there for everyone to see. And they have all the other figures as well, drilling and so on, all of the things that are published by the Ministry of Energy on a monthly basis. So that was a fiction, a colossal untruth that the member placed onto the record. The other problem, Madam Speaker, that the member has is that if he actually took the time to check CSO data, I know the CSO suffered terribly under the stewardship of the member for Caroni Central. They didn't have a building. Staff are working from home. But, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, 48-6.
But that's a fact. That's a fact.
Members, just be mindful. Any member could raise any standing order. Member, Minister of Finance, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Because that is a fact. A matter of public record that the staff of the CSO had no building and they were working from home. But if the member for Caroni Central were to take the time, rather than putting fiction and disinformation and misinformation into the public domain, and check with the CSO, he would have this information, Madam Speaker. And, Madam Speaker, according to them, the CSO is unreliable. According to them, the governor of the central bank is a PNM. According to them, the IMF is run by the PNM now. And the World Bank run by the PNM. The whole world is run by the PNM, apparently. And this minister apparently has the power to just call up the IMF and call up the World Bank and say something good about Trinidad and Tobago, and it happens. I must be a magician. I'm a wizard. I must be a wizard. But be that as it may, Madam Speaker, let me put into the record. Yes, I must be a wizard. Let me put into the record that the growth rate using constant prices, 2012 constant prices for the first quarter of 2018 official CSO statistics. And let me deal with another mischief in this motion. That's the second recital. Second recital is extremely mischievous, Madam Speaker, because it says that the data is at variance with the data put out by the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister. Whereas this is at variance with the assertions of the Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister, and other government spokesmen on the subjects of growth and economic performance over the past 2 years. Well, I've just proven the IMF is not at variance with us at all. The IMF is with us. They agree that the economy has been turning since 2018 in the right direction. But be that as it may, Madam Speaker, if the member for Caroni Central had bothered to go and secure the data, he would have learned that in the first quarter of 2018, the economy grew by 0.9%. In the second quarter of 2018, the economy grew by 2.1%. In the third quarter of 2018, the economy grew by 1.5%. And I'm reliably informed by the Minister of Planning that within the next couple of weeks, we will get the fourth quarter data for economic growth at constant prices in Trinidad and Tobago from the Central Statistical Office. And you know, as I said, if the authorities were preaching doom and gloom, the members opposite would embrace them and say, "Oh, look at that, look at what the CSO is saying, look at what the central bank is saying." But you see these things, it hurt in them. It hurt in them that we have had 3 successive quarters of economic growth in the first 3 quarters of 2018, Madam Speaker. It hurt in them. Because by any definition, Madam Speaker, 3 successive quarters of growth is an economic turnaround, Madam Speaker, by any definition. Now, you can't help it, huh? Like a little child. But anyway, Madam Speaker, let me just move on now. The member also attacked the central bank in the most vicious way. And why was he attacking the central bank? I suspect it has something to do with the monetary policy announcement made by the central bank on the 29th of March 2019. I suspect so. Because in that monetary policy announcement published by the central bank, where the central bank maintained the repo rate at 5%, the central bank had this to say: the recovery in the energy sector continued into the final quarter of 2018, completely contradicting what we have heard from the member for Caroni Central with his bogus statistics about everything is declining. According to the central bank, the recovery in the energy sector continued into the final quarter of 2018. The boost to natural gas output is expected to persist into 2019 as a result of Angeline and other investments, with positive spin-offs on downstream activities which had been adversely affected by natural gas shortages. Natural gas shortages created by them, Madam Speaker. But this is what I know has hurt them the most. Listen to this. And this is not Imbert talking. Outside of energy, the CSO's index of domestic production showed a 26.7% increase year on year. 26.7% increase year in year in non-energy production, Madam Speaker. That is what hurting them. So it is not just that the energy sector has improved and is, Madam Speaker, really. I know you think I could handle them, but it's ridiculous. I beg your protection.
Minister of Finance, I know you could handle yourself. Please continue. Please continue, Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, Madam Naparima is just annoying. So outside of energy, the CSO's index of domestic production showed a 26.7% increase year on year in non-energy production in the final quarter of 2018. And listen to this, which contradicts the fiction just put into the record by the member for Caroni Central. The increase was concentrated in food, manufacturing, beverages, and tobacco industries. Central Bank says non-energy production increased by 26% in the latter part of 2018, and this increase was concentrated in food manufacturing, beverages, and tobacco industries. I just heard the member for Caroni Central say that all of those sectors are in decline. That's what he said. Yep. They're all declining. 26.7% increase. Yeah, man, would you stop it? I didn't talk when you were talking. Other available indicators monitored by the central bank, such as retail sales, new car registrations, mine aggregates, point to a general steadiness of non-energy activity at the end of 2018 into early 2019. The impact of the acceleration of several public sector works on investment is likely to be felt in coming years, coming quarters. This is just 2 months ago, you know. At just 1.2%, headline inflation remains very low, the result of a combination of monetary policy, demand conditions, and low imported inflation. Interestingly, the historically volatile food prices have been remarkably slow moving in recent months, with declines recorded for meat, fruit, and vegetables. So, Madam Speaker, these are the facts. But this is what is upsetting them. And this is why the member for Caroni Central went to so great lengths to disparage the central bank and to accuse them of being manipulated by the Minister of Finance. Nothing could be further from the truth, Madam Speaker. Nothing could be further from the truth. The next part of this motion, Madam Speaker, the member didn't really deal with his motion. And I suspect that what must have confuffled him was that announcement by the IMF yesterday, because it made our daily newspapers. So that must have confuffled him when the IMF came out and said that our economy is growing. So the opposite of his motion. But Madam Speaker, will you be quiet? Madam Speaker, come on.
Member for Caroni Central, all right. I'm sure you have another opportunity to speak in this debate, okay? Member, Minister for Finance.
I know they can't take it in. No, the member did not even deal with his motion. Look at this part. The economic experience of the majority of citizens is of distress and concern, anxiety and fear, and many among the middle class are challenged to meet their mortgage payments. He didn't deal with that? I will deal with that. So let's go into the data. Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, who by law gathers data from the commercial banking sector. What was the payment of mortgage loans by consumers year by year, Madam Speaker? In December 2010, the total payments made by consumers to lending institutions with respect to mortgage loans, was $7.14 billion, Madam Speaker. In December 2011, it was $7.93 billion. In December 2012, it was $9.1 billion. December 2013, it was $9.9 billion. In December 2014, it was $11.0 billion. In December 2015, it was $12 billion. We came in September 2015. So that the payment of mortgages by consumers, by ordinary people, increased from 11 billion in December 2014 to 12 billion 3 months after we came in. But that's not all. According to the member for Caroni Central, people can't pay their mortgage. They're gone through. Let us see what happened in December 2016. The payments by consumers to lending institutions for mortgages increased from 12 billion in December 2015 to 12.5 billion in 2016. But that's not all. It then increased to 13.4 billion in 2017 and reached a high of 14.1 billion in 2018, Madam Speaker. That is facts, not fiction. So we have had a doubling of mortgage lending and mortgage payments over the last 8 years, Madam Speaker, with an increase between December 2014 and December 2018 of $3.1 billion under this administration, Madam Speaker. Actual payments of mortgages by consumers, not the fictional data put into the system by the member.
Lawyers are buying property in cash no more?
Yeah. Let's look at the net credit to the private sector, because according to the honorable member, the private sector is hesitant to invest in the local economy. That's another recital that he didn't deal with. I will deal with it. So in December 2010, the net credit to the private sector was 38 billion. December 2011, 41 billion. December 2012, 43 billion. December 2013, 45 billion. December 2014, 48 billion. So at the end of their term, the net credit to the private sector by banks, which is an indicator of investment in the economy, was 48 billion. In December 2015, what was it? $51 billion. In December 2016, $53 billion. In December 2017, $56 billion. And in December 2018, $58 billion, Madam Speaker. So it increased by $10 billion. $10 billion. The net credit to the private sector under our watch over the last 3.5 years, Madam. And if I reject this nonsense about people are not paying their mortgages and the private sector is not investing in the economy, the figures do not support that fiction, Madam Speaker. Let's move on now, Madam Speaker. Let's move on. Another one of the recitals was the depletion of foreign reserves is occurring at a net rate of 1.6 billion annually. Well, that is a Nancy story. I have the actual figures here, Madam Speaker, the actual data, the official statistics for our foreign reserves, Madam Speaker. And I will read into the record the actual level of foreign reserves over the last couple of years, Madam Speaker. And I can tell you, without any fear of contradiction, Madam Speaker, that the net foreign reserves at the end of the third quarter in 2018 was $7,465 million US. And I can tell you that the net foreign reserves at the end of April 2019, so that is 7 months later, so at the end of September 2018, our net foreign reserves was $7,465 million US. At the end of April 2019, our foreign reserves 7 months later was $7,311 million. Now I know members opposite are statistically challenged and mathematically challenged. So I'll do the maths. So the difference between 7.46 billion and 7.31 billion is 0.15, Madam Speaker. So over a 7-month period, our foreign reserves have only declined by $150 million, Madam Speaker. $150 million. But according to this thing, our foreign reserves are declining at the rate of 1.6 billion a year, Madam Speaker. Let me read the recital. The depletion of foreign reserves is occurring at the net rate of 1.6 billion annually. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker. Carney Central says that. Total fiction, total make-believe, total bogus statistics, total fake data, Madam Speaker. I've just shown you that our foreign reserves only declined by 150 million US over the last 7 months, Madam Speaker. And over the last 8 months, it might be 160 million US dollars. In 2/3 of the year, the reserve declined by less than $200 million, Madam Speaker. So I have dealt with that as well, Madam Speaker. I have dealt with that as well. Let me, and what's this next recital? The government seems unable to manage the economy effectively. People live with uncertainty. Let's deal with the facts, Madam Speaker. I have brought with me some of the statements made by the international agencies. Again, these statements are not made by me. These statements are made by Standard & Poor's and made by Moody's, Madam Speaker. And these statements made by these rating agencies are very, very positive, Madam Speaker. And let me digress before I go to that. Let's deal with another fiction put into this House by members of the opposition. I heard the other day that the banks in Trinidad and Tobago are on the brink of collapse, and that money is leaving the country, and that people are exporting their money. But let me read into the record what are the facts, Madam Speaker, with respect to our two largest commercial banks. I asked for data on Republic Bank and on FCB, Madam Speaker, two of the largest commercial banks in Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker. The total assets of Republic Bank, because if money is leaving the country, assets should be going down. The total assets of Republic Bank have grown from 66 billion in 2016 to 71 billion in 2018, and they continue to grow. Madam Speaker, it is very difficult with Naparima continuously muttering at me. I ask you again.
Naparima, is it that you want to make an intervention? You can be asked to give way. You ask your friend if you wish to do that.
So, Madam Speaker,
Walk into that.
total assets of Republic Bank have grown from 66 billion to 71 billion dollars over the last 3 years, Madam Speaker. It is therefore impossible for there to be capital flight out of this particular bank. It's impossible. Its profit has grown by 7.5%, Madam Speaker, over the last 3 years. First Citizens Bank, assets increased from 38 billion in 2016 to 42 billion in 2018. Again, it's impossible. If all this money, what, they're taking it from out under their mattress or something? It had to be that. Out from the vault or from the room where they keep the money, it had to be that. But in the commercial banking sector, what I'm seeing here is a growth in assets, FCB, from 38 billion to 42 billion over the last 3 years. And a growth in income from 2016 to 2018 of our national bank, which is majority owned by this government, under our stewardship, the growth in income at FCB is 22%, Madam Speaker, over the last 3 years. 22%, Madam Speaker, growth in income from 2016 to 2018. So if the largest bank is growing by almost 8%, and another bank that is also catching up and becoming quite large is growing by 22%, Madam Speaker. And assets are going from 66 to 70 billion and from 38 to 42 billion. How on earth could there be people leaving this country in droves and money leaving this country by capital flight, Madam Speaker? What is happening is that the membership of the UNC is leaving them in droves and flying. That's what's going on. Now, let me also go in, Madam Speaker. Let me go into what S&P and Moody's had to say in their 2018 credit ratings reports for Trinidad and Tobago. But in terms of fiscal consolidation, Madam Speaker, Standard & Poor's told us, I'm quoting from them, that the fiscal consolidation of this government and sizable government assets will continue to support the creditworthiness of Trinidad and Tobago under this government, Madam Speaker. New revenue measures, spending restraint, stronger energy performance will contribute to the improved fiscal deficit. That's S&P. Let's go to S&P's comment on assets. Solid central bank reserves, sizable government assets, including a sovereign wealth fund, continue to limit fiscal and external financing risks. It was what Moody had to say. Government liquidity risk was assessed as very low. Accumulation of savings. The accumulation of savings over the past decade stabilized performance in the face of fluctuating commodity prices. S&P.
Mr. Finance?
Yes, ma'am.
Your original time is now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes to complete your presentation, if you wish. You may proceed.
I mean, I take all of it. The accumulation of savings in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund is worth about 27% of GDP. And let me just talk about the Heritage Fund, Madam Speaker. When we came into office, the level in the Heritage Fund was approximately $5.5 billion US, Madam Speaker. $5.5 billion US. This government, in accordance with the law, made 2 withdrawals from the Heritage Fund. We withdrew in 2016, May of 2016, we withdrew approximately $360 million US. And in March of 2017, again, we withdrew approximately $260 million US, Madam Speaker. So that's a total in excess of $600 million US so far over the last 3.5 years that this administration has withdrawn from the Heritage Fund since we came into office. And as I said, when we came into office, the Heritage Fund was in the vicinity of $5.6 billion US. So we've withdrawn $600 million US. The fund was at about $5.6 million US. Let's round it off. What is the level of the fund today? After having withdrawn $600 million US, because of the prudent management of the fund by this government, I can tell this Parliament today that the fund has grown from $5.6 billion in 2015 to $6.1 billion in 2019, Madam Speaker, as of the 3rd of May, 2019. So the fund has grown, Madam Speaker, by $500 million because of the prudent management of this government. And we withdrew $600 million. If we had not withdrawn that 600, the fund would have grown under this government by over $1 billion. And these things do not escape the attention of the international credit rating agencies. And that is why they speak about our Heritage Fund being worth 27% of GDP. What did S&P have to say about the energy sector? The operation of new fields and higher energy prices will steer the economy back to growth. And the energy sector, the S&P had to say that natural gas production is expected to increase about 13% over the next 2 years due to the startup of new domestic gas production. Moody's, a sustained increase in oil and gas production, which materially improves medium-term economic growth prospects, would also potentially lead to an upgrade, Madam Speaker.
Wow.
It's not
Well done.
PNM talking. It's not PNM talking. This is Moody's in their 2018 report on Trinidad and Tobago. And hear what they have to say. This is Moody's 2018. The economy is starting to stabilize and will enjoy a recovery in the next fiscal year, Madam Speaker. An increase in gas production in 2017, following the coming on stream of 2 gas fields, is driving a rebound in the energy sector. Natural gas production increased 6.5% year over year in the last quarter of 2017. And data through the first 3 months of 2018 show a 13% annual increase in natural gas production. What did the credit rating agencies have to say for our external vulnerability? The final score for external vulnerability risk of Trinidad and Tobago, this is the risk of Trinidad and Tobago collapsing because of an external shock, is set at very low, which is below the indicative score of very low minus, which is below the indicative score of very low plus, to account for improved current account prospects based on recovery in oil prices as well as increased gas production. External pressures are contained given a robust international reserves position, an external vulnerability EVI of 19%, a small current account deficit, almost entirely financed by foreign direct investment. This is not me talking. This is Moody's talking in 2018, that our risk of the economy being damaged by an external shock is extremely low. What does S&P have to say? Following an estimated 7% contraction in real GDP over the last 2 years, largely due to the downturn in Trinidad and Tobago's large energy sector, S&P expects that the operation of new fields and higher energy prices will steer the economy back to growth. This is what S&P had to say last year. And now we have the IMF saying yesterday that this really happened, that the economy returned to growth. Complete opposite of everything Currency Central had to say. Moody's, going forward, it is expected that the current account deficit would narrow to 2.9% of GDP in 2019 because of improved performance of the energy sector. The current account deficit is generally fully financed by foreign direct investment inflows, an increase in gas production, driving a rebound in the energy sector. Growth in the energy sector will be supported by the coming on stream of gas from Starfish, followed by Dolphin Gas, Angeline Gas Field, and the Cassia Gas Compression Project, Madam Speaker. So, if one listens to the external agencies, Madam Speaker, if one listens to the credit rating agencies, Madam Speaker, if one listens to what the experts, real experts, have to say, if one listens to what the central bank has to say, and Madam Speaker, I really must condemn and reject those ridiculous, unfair, prejudicial allegations against the central bank. I reject them absolutely. And I reject all allegations against the CSO as well, Madam Speaker. Under this government, the Central Statistical Office now has a home, now has a proper office, which it didn't have under the past administration. And Madam Speaker, they can't help it. They don't like good news. They don't like good news. Madam Speaker, the Central Statistical Office, over the last 2.5 years under this government, as a result of the initiatives of this government, had a comprehensive upgrade through IMF's Regional Technical Assistance Office, CARTAC, the Caribbean Regional Technical Advisory Office of the IMF. The IMF has regional advisory offices all over the world. They have them in Asia, they have them in Europe, and so on. We have one in the Caribbean called CARTAC. And the CSO was the recipient of technical assistance from CARTAC, from the IMF, within the last 2 years, Madam Speaker. And the IMF has trained our CSO into improving its data gathering, its data analysis, its data collection, improving the accuracy of its estimates and its figures, Madam Speaker. And because of that, Madam Speaker, we in Trinidad and Tobago, under the previous administration, our GDP was, Madam Speaker, it's really hard, you know. I have a few minutes more. I'm asking you to tell them to stop talking, please.
I'll ask all members to kindly observe Standing Order 53 in terms of limiting the crosstalk. If you're going to speak in low volumes, but if the conversation is such that it has to be continuous, then members are invited to go outside, have the conversation, and then return. Minister of Finance.
And I can say, without any fear of contradiction, that we have a far better, far more efficient, far more productive CSO now under this government than existed 5 years ago, Madam Speaker, when they didn't even have a building to operate into. And what was discovered, Madam Speaker, is that because the reference year for Trinidad and Tobago's GDP was tied to the year 2000, the CARTAC told, the IMF told the CSO, that's way too long. And it was recommended, and the CSO took the recommendation to rebase our GDP to the year 2012. Because they said you can't be going back 15 years in terms of looking at the growth in national production. So we rebased our GDP to 2012, and based on the technical assistance from CARTAC, we improved our forecasting and our estimation and calculation of GDP. And this government had to take a hit, because what we discovered is that because the CSO did not have the tools and did not have the resources under the last administration, the GDP was being overestimated under the last administration. Overestimated, Madam Speaker. So Madam Speaker, we had to take that and take a reduction in our GDP. It wasn't easy, because it affects our debt to GDP ratio. But since then, Madam Speaker, the CSO, yes, I know they doc S&P, Moody's, and IMF. Since then, Madam Speaker, the CSO has been producing accurate and reliable data. And that is why I can say with confidence that I have full confidence in the data produced by our Central Statistical Office. I can also say I have full confidence in the data produced by our Central Bank. And I want to particularly thank now the members of the Ministry of Finance who accompanied me before I close, Madam Speaker, when I went to the annual IMF spring meetings in Washington last month, Madam Speaker. I want to particularly thank the team that went with me, the Permanent Secretary, the Governor of the Central Bank, our representatives at the IMF in Washington and at the World Bank, Madam Speaker, our constituency head in Washington, Madam Speaker, because Trinidad belongs to a group of countries, and all of the technocrats that accompanied us, Madam Speaker, where we had face-to-face meetings with the World Bank and the IMF And as a result of those face-to-face meetings with our diligent, expert, professional technocrats, we have been able to get them to publish very favorable outcomes for Trinidad and Tobago and to confirm that the Trinidad and Tobago economy has turned around. And I want to thank the public servants for accompanying me to meet with the IMF and the World Bank, who have now confirmed what we have been saying, that this economy has turned around, this economy has stabilized, this economy is growing, and this economy is on a growth path. I therefore reject this motion absolutely, Madam Speaker.
Member for Miaro.
Madam Speaker, I want to start and say I reject every single thing this Minister of Finance now said. Absolutely disregard and reject. Madam Speaker, thank you very much for allowing me to join in this private motion brought by my colleague from Caroni Central. Madam Speaker, I won't take them on. Madam Speaker, there's a term that is used called gaslighting. I don't know if you have ever heard of that term, Madam Speaker, but what gaslighting is a term by which the public is manipulated by believing when someone tries to convince them that they are crazy. That is gaslighting. And what this government is trying to do, Madam Speaker, is to gaslight the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'll tell you how. You close down Petrotrin, and you put thousands of people out of jobs, and you put them on the breadline, and you say, we do it to help you. That is crazy people, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, they are saying to ignore all the warnings that every economist in this country is saying. And you know what they're saying? Everything good. Don't take them on. They're crazy. Madam Speaker, they're saying, never mind that you can't find work. There are plenty of jobs outside there. Never mind what you're doing to diversify the economy. Go drive truck in Canada. Madam Speaker, that is gaslighting. They want people to believe that everybody else is crazy in this country, but we are not buying that. Madam Speaker, after listening to the Minister of Finance, you would swear to God that this country don't have a crime problem. We are up to about 200 murders now. You would swear to God that there isn't about 40,000 people out of jobs today, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you would swear to God that Navet given water.
I want to caution members about this way that we flagrantly just calling God into everything.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you. So I would want to ask, you know, with all of those good numbers, those great numbers, Madam Speaker, that the Minister of Finance now projected here for this House, why it is, you know, half of the country can't find water. I mean, we have to understand that the numbers are one thing. The numbers is one thing, and the reality on the ground is something else. Madam Speaker, let me ask, or let me just make a statement on how sometimes these numbers, I want to ask, how do these agencies, all the agencies that the Honorable Minister of Finance spoke about, where do the numbers come from? And it reminds me many years ago when I used to work at a particular company. My boss was a little lazy fella, so he never wanted to do the assessments, the HR assessment. So he would send me the form and say, Paray, fill it out yourself, and I go sign off it. So I want to know if these are if we or our systems are providing these numbers and these foreign agencies are just reflecting on what they're being told. Because the reality on the ground, Madam Speaker, it does not reflect what the numbers are saying. So I have a bit of problem with that. Madam Speaker, I know the Minister of Finance spoke about a couple items, and some of it I would address during my presentation. But I want, you know, the Minister spoke a lot about numbers and quoted several numbers, percentages, and so on. But there is one number that I want who is ever responding to me will explain. Because to me, I feel this is the most important number that this government has to explain. And that number is 40 billion $264,393,438.68. That is the number that this government ought to explain. And I'll tell you what that number is, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, according to the records, and I'm quoting here from Chapter 6, Accounts of the Treasury, page 57, according to the records of the Comptroller of Accounts as at 30th of September 2018, the Exchequer account was overdrawn by $40 billion. And it's not me saying it, it's Central Bank. It's the Exchequer account. That is a number that I think is reflective, that speaks to the condition that the citizenry is dealing with. And that is the number that the government ought to explain. Madam Speaker, the minister spoke about foreign exchange. And I want to present to you that it is not only about how much reserves that we have, which is a good thing, but it's access. Why it is every day you have business, I have some businesses in Rio Claro, Madam Speaker, you know as well, I'm a businessman as well. I have the same challenges to access foreign exchange at the banks. And I just give you a bit of my own experience. A few months ago, I was having serious problems. I need to get US currency to pay programmers for my business. And for about 5 months, when I request $15,000 and $20,000 US dollars, I'm getting $200, $300, and the accounts increased. So I went to the bank, I called my credit manager, and I said, sir, why am I not getting foreign currency? Because my liabilities are going up, and you will put me in problems. He says, sir, look, they're not getting releases from central banks. So it is in conflict to what the minister now said. So we went on and I said, look, when the banks have to seize, they seize house, they seize land, and they seize motor car. I told my credit manager, Madam Speaker, I said, sir, if I cannot get the US currency to pay my bills, I hope the bank know what to do with 14 satellite dishes and 4,000 cable boxes. Because when I can't pay for my programmers, they're going to turn the service off, and I will lose my customer base. Madam Speaker, when the bank manager had to figure out what he going to do with 14 satellite dishes, in 2 days' time I get 2 credit cards for the amount that I could pay the bills on a monthly basis. So, Madam Speaker, when you talk about having all this foreign exchange, why is the process so convoluted for small and medium-sized businesses to get access to foreign exchange?
That's the problem.
But I will get more into that as we go along. Madam Speaker, the minister spoke about mortgages, and he spoke about how, our citizenry, we are paying our mortgages and so on. But the reality on the ground, there are about 40,000 people out of jobs. There are just out of Petrotrin alone, about 9,000 professional families that are on the breadline today. It is not only about the mortgages, but how do they pay these things? How do they pay these mortgages when you're not working? And that is the pain that the citizenry is going through, and the lack of confidence that the government of the day, they are not articulating where do we go from here. And it's creating a problem for them, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance spoke as well about businesses and accessing loan. I can tell you, it's easy to explain that sometimes businesses could be buying property. They're not invested in productive capacity types of work. Madam Speaker, so there's a lot of things that you can explain when you look at the numbers, but one has to look at the reality on the ground as well. And I really feel that the Minister of Finance, they are not focusing either, they are not hearing the cries of the people. I do not know if my colleagues opposite are listening to their constituents and they are reflecting it to the government at the end of the day. But my constituents, they are coming every day and they are crying and complaining about the challenges that they are having, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the gentleman from the IMF who spoke, I read the release as well. And sometimes, we read and interpret things differently. And what I gathered was that the IMF has said, look, we are seeing some improvements, but we want to get some data from you. And we will give an assessment, a reassessment sometime in July this year when I get 5 months of solid data in 2019, and then we will revisit it. That was my understanding. But, Madam Speaker, you know, the Minister of Finance, you know, he thanks God for this uptick in energy, in gas production. And then he comes on the other side and he wants to beat the People's Partnership for not doing anything. But we must always discern the truth from the untruth. Between 2006 and 2009, the last PNM administration did not make one development in any type of exploration. Not a field was agreed to, nothing. And Madam Speaker, the window of horizon for development in the energy sector is between 6 and 7 years. So you know what? Thank God for the People's Partnership under the leadership of Siparia. In 2011, fields went out, agreements were made, and those windows, those 6 and 7 year windows, matured a year ago, a year and a half ago, to have Angeline, to have Juniper, to have Truck. All these things are what is creating the uptick today, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, it is the uptick in the energy sector that is creating this little blip that shows some growth, and we are thankful for that. We are grateful for that. But you know what, Madam Speaker? There was a sleight of hand somewhere a couple years ago, and parts of the petrochemical commodity, the deliveries, were moved from petrochemical and placed under manufacturing. So the data that is being sent, and you can't argue that, Madam Speaker, that is the truth. The data that is being sent to the international agencies, Madam Speaker, that data is now showing parts of the petrochemical services and goods and services under manufacturing. So when the minister comes and says that there's an uptick also in manufacturing, it is wrong. It is really the classification that has changed, and you are seeing some data presented in a particular format. This is why, Madam Speaker, there is a huge disconnect between the numbers that the minister now produced and the reality on the ground. And that's a fact. Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago has the potential, we have the potential, Madam Speaker, to be returned on a road to prosperity. I have no doubt about that. Citizens of this beautiful republic, we have always enjoyed very high per capita incomes because of the exploitation of our oil and gas resources. We have a bright, young, educated labor force, and that was developed and strengthened under the People's Partnership under Siparia. Yeah. Now, you cannot deny that. Madam Speaker, during 2010 to 2015, Trinidad and Tobago, we built up severe, substantial financial buffers in the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which was about $5 billion. Our foreign reserve, when we demitted in 2015, was upwards of $11 billion. And, you know, sometimes you listen to the Minister of Finance, and you want to know where is his data coming from, because it amuses me every time, and this is not the first time this has been, 4 budgets, 4 media reviews, and it's the same conversation over and over, and we stand here and we rebut it again. But, Madam Speaker, despite the substantial strengths that we had in this economy, Madam Speaker, today, the economy in Trinidad and Tobago is on life support. It is on life support. As a matter of fact, it's actually hovering on a total verge of absolute calamity and collapse, Madam Speaker. And that is the view on the ground. That is the view of the people who are living in Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, since this administration assumed office in 2015, it has failed miserably to properly steer this country through this deep recession that we find ourselves in. And by the way, those on the other side like to blame the partnership and the UNC for this, but Madam Speaker, the reality of the matter, we were hit with a massive reduction in the price of oil and gas, and that is the reality of the matter. That is what has driven the challenges for economy today. And I always maintain, if we don't focus on the truth, how are we going to fix it? If you are focusing on everything else besides the truth, how are we going to fix the problem? Madam Speaker, I am concerned. I am concerned that the government of the day are fixated on every other thing in this country, on corruption, on criminal, and I mean, but listen, that is part of the politics. That is part of the function of the government, and I understand that. But I'm not hearing anything in terms of how are we going to fix the truths in this country with regards to how did we get here, which is a collapse in the energy sector. We have to look at diversification, we have to talk about agriculture, we have to talk about tourism, and in 4 years, Madam Speaker, I have not seen anything in any real way to take us forward. Madam Speaker, our gross domestic product, based on the CSO data, declined by about 6.5% between 2016 and 2018. Madam Speaker, that's the sharpest contraction this economy has ever had, probably in the last 30 years. That says something about the management style of this administration. And this is the conversation. Sorry, this is the conversation that any strategic body, any agency of the state who's advising the Minister of Finance in terms of planning and strategy, they ought to be dealing with these things. How do we reduce that gap? How do we improve GDP and so on? I am not seeing it. If they're doing it in the background, well, they're doing it quietly, but I am not seeing it, the people on the ground not feeling it. Madam Speaker, the Trinidad and Tobago economy is about 10% smaller today than it was 4 years ago. Madam Speaker, that is a result of failed economic policies by this government. Madam Speaker, after listening to the Honorable Minister of Finance, I got the sense that he's very optimistic. And it's important in government, it's important as businessmen as well, that we keep a sense of optimism in anything that we do. But the optimism is not based on any solid foundation. There is none. And I'll tell you why. There are 4 areas. If, as a government, they cannot address policies in 4 areas, that optimism will be turned to zero. And firstly, there is an optimism that additional gas has to come into the system. And I believe it will come at some point in time in the future, because I said the horizon for these things is between 6 and 7 years. But the production from Juniper and Angeline, Madam Speaker, you know, those fields, there is not enough production to eliminate the gas shortage that we've had to deal with for the last couple of years. So if you can't speak to that, how are you going to reassure our tenants in Point Lisa that we have the gas for you? That is not being addressed. And Madam Speaker, while we're on the topic of our tenants in Point Lisa, I remember listening to the Minister of Energy in the Senate one day, and he was responding to Senator Mark's question about the gas price and so on. And he made this very interesting comment. He said that, you know, everyone, meaning government, foreign multinational, subcontractors, everybody who's in the train of service, we all have to take a hit. Now, I understand what he means. Everybody had a cut and suit and fit, work for smaller margins and so on, because we've had to do it in the past. But, Madam Speaker, I've been a service provider in the energy sector for about 20 years. And I, as well, I'm sure the minister knows, because he used to be in the energy sector as well. Energy giants don't take hits. They either change their model or they change the location. And that is the risk we run when there is a lack of confidence, there is a lack of direction, and there is no philosophy behind where this government has to take our energy sector. And that is a reality that I am asking the government to deal with very, very quickly and urgently. Madam Speaker, secondly, on that list of things that I challenge his optimism is energy prices. We seem fixated still, after 4.5 years, that we must pray for oil. Madam Speaker, I don't think that's a good strategy in all fairness. Wouldn't say. But Madam Speaker, the United States is doing better. They are finding more shale oil and gas easier at lower cost. Madam Speaker, while it cost us about $38 or $39 US to bring up a barrel of oil or a barrel of oil equivalent for natural gas, it costs a US company about $9 US. So that is very difficult to compete with. So what is our strategy to deal with that? Because the Permian basins, they are putting out a lot of gas at this time. Thirdly, Madam Speaker, I don't think the real effects of the shutdown of Petrotrin is being felt at this time. I do not think, now I see it on a morning, I have less than 1 hour traffic into Princestown, and I was asking, well, where did the traffic go? They said that's workers used to go Petrotrin. So that's a plus, there's 1 less hour of traffic. But when you go to Marabella and some of these fence line communities, you are seeing the downturn, the traffic, the activities have, virtually disappeared. Madam Speaker, I do not think that the government has really looked at the impact, the long-term impact and the effect, and how that is going to impact our finances, and more so, our foreign exchange renewal. What are we going to use to add to the bucket of our foreign reserves? Madam Speaker, besides the energy sector, and this is where I think most of the economists in this country and most of the people who have a better idea of how economics work, they will tell you that unless we get the non-energy sector moving, no matter how much government financing of infrastructure projects and so on, nothing in that is going to build productive capacity to create new jobs, to create long-term sustainable jobs, to create revenue in a real way. So, Madam Speaker, that is important. We will never move Trinidad and Tobago forward, now or in the future, unless as we hedge energy, we move the other sectors of the economy at the same time. Madam Speaker, construction has been hard hit by the slow pace of execution in public sector investment projects. Only 2 days ago, as my colleague from Caroni Central mentioned, $700 million was moved from the IDF to pay off Petrotrin's debt, or a part of it. When you remove that type of spending as well, you are really challenging the mobility and the movement of money at the very lowest of levels. Madam Speaker, there is also a crisis of confidence that has resulted in no new foreign direct investment flowing in the non-energy sector since 2015. Madam Speaker, I will only describe as a term that, I will call it fiscal bazudi. This current PNM administration has been implementing a number of poorly designed fiscal policies. It's queued up incorrectly, and at the same time, it's been jettisoned at an unsuspecting public. Madam Speaker, when you put all those things together, it is room for chaos. And whatever is blocking the sentiments on the ground from reaching to the directorate of this country, Madam Speaker, that is something that is very dangerous. Because constituents are saying, like government is not hearing, they're not listening. Why are they not hearing? If you care, you might hear. But if you don't care, well, that's another story. Madam Speaker, when you try to bridge a reduction in revenue because of what I explained, the drop in our oil and gas prices, and you want to impose a list of taxes on the population, that cannot work, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when you look at the 12,000 food items where VAT was introduced, albeit at 3% less, 2.5% less, but it was 12,000 food items that were put back onto the VAT list. You have higher taxes for businesses, and then when you put that and you just throw a 10% online tax for good measure, well, then that says a lot to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, we cannot tax people. It is absolutely futile to impose regressive taxes on a citizenry while an economy is in deep recession. And Madam Speaker, the job losses are mounting every day. And these are the realities. This has nothing to do, it has everything to do with the numbers that the Honorable Minister now said. But the numbers is not reflective of what's happening in Rio Claro, in Mayaro, in Princestown, in Port of Spain, in Arima, on the East-West Corridor. It is not reflective. So it tells me that there is a disconnect somewhere that we must fix. And Madam Speaker, I have no pleasure, I seek no pleasure in seeing anybody fail in anything, because when they fail, we all fail. When they fail, my children fail. So I have a serious problem with that. Why is there a disconnect happening in this government? And that disconnect needs to be dealt with very, very quickly. Madam Speaker, the minister spoke about all those beautiful numbers and nice, ratings from these agencies. But these are agencies that are getting numbers from here. Let us see for a moment what some other agencies who are looking at an overall picture, who are calling up people on phone, they are talking to business people, they are talking to sections of the country, that they're taking information from the Minister of Finance. They are measuring Trinidad and Tobago's performance on what you call the Global 12 indices. And they look at our ranking in global competitiveness, ease of doing business, economic freedom, network readiness, corruption perception, and what they try to do is give a sense of whether you are improving, you are reversing, or you have remained stagnated. So, Madam Speaker, I just want to touch a few of those. Trinidad and Tobago Global Competitive Ranking has stagnated at 78th position. The ease of doing business ranking dramatically declined from 67 in 2008 to 102. Madam Speaker, how is that reflective in what the Honorable Minister of Finance now presented to us here in his rebuttal?
Last year they went from 102 up to this year 105.
It's 105. Okay. Madam Speaker, in terms of economic freedom, and these are all independent agencies that are not taking our data, they are doing a global survey. Trinidad and Tobago ranking has dropped again from 29 in 2008 to 112 in 2018. Madam Speaker, these rankings cannot be as a result of what the Minister of Finance now said. So something is wrong with that. And those agencies is not the UNC talking. It is a disconnect somewhere that we have to find and fix wherever it's happening. Madam Speaker, there is an index called the Network Readiness Index, also referred to as the Technology Readiness, and that has remained stagnated. They have us in the 67th position for the last few years. But again, Madam Speaker, ICT is an engine for growth. It's an engine for growth. And any wise and sensible administration coming into government, they ought to have seen that as an opportunity to drive the conversation for diversification.
Yes, correct.
Right? And you can't tell me after 4 years that we remain stagnated at 67, knowing that services is money in the bag. Services is where you're going to get foreign currency because you can have offshore and offshore services. And you don't have to put a man in the United States. He can do the work here, foreign currency comes in. Madam Speaker, that I have an issue with. And lastly,
Member for Miaru, your original speaking time is now spent. You have 15 more minutes to complete your presentation. You may proceed.
Madam Speaker, lastly, in terms of the Corruption Perception Index, in 2018, the ranking stood at 78%. Madam Speaker, you know we haven't moved anywhere since 2008. Madam Speaker, again, if business is doing so well and all these lovely things are happening, why aren't these rankings changing? Why are they moving? Why are we reducing? Madam Speaker, I want to just remind the country that, you know, in May 2018, 10th of May to be exact, the Minister of Finance stood in this house and he said, you know, in his normal, excited way, which I enjoy looking at sometimes. Yeah, because, you know, we need a little humor in here at times. The economy is turning around, and I wish I could have done all the handwork as well. The economy is turning around, and in fact, it has turned around. Revenue collection is up. The non-oil sector is growing, and the energy sector is booming. Madam Speaker, we can talk all we want here. We have an audience that is looking and is listening to us. But how do you explain where we are after Minister of Finance makes that comment 1 year ago, close to 1 year ago? It means that nothing has changed. And to stand here and listen to the Minister of Finance speak on all these numbers, but it is not reflective on what's happening on the ground, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you know, we talk about focusing on the non-energy sector, and sometimes I feel we don't understand the importance of the non-energy sector. Madam Speaker, the non-energy sector picks up over 90% of the labor force. About 90% of the labor force. And anything that is affecting any part of the chain that puts that person to work, whether it's Forex, whether it's access to work, whether it's access roads for the farmers, whether it's water for the farmers, whatever in the chain of activity that we cannot provide as a state to those 90% of the labor force, we are in problems, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, that is the kind of things when you are strategizing. How are we going to make sure that nothing in that chain interrupts that section of labor in the non-energy sector? So, Madam Speaker, that is something that they must look clearly at. Madam Speaker, our manufacturers, talk about manufacturing, there is a constant complaint, and I don't know how the minister says that we don't have a problem there. But I have manufacturers are asking, are saying, MP, we are asking for 200,000 US, sometimes we get 100,000, we get 50,000. You know, everything we make or we try to make in this country has a component of a foreign input, Madam Speaker. And when we have $7 billion, but yet, use how much? The minister said 168 million in 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. But why it is our manufacturers can't get the inputs? Because the input will be required for the production chain, and that is required to put people to work. So that is an issue. So something is disconnecting us from what's happening on the ground here, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the cloud of uncertainty that is hanging over our natural gas supplies, I am worried that if it is not dealt with properly, with confidence, with assurance, we may run the risk of turning Point Lisas into the new Rust Belt. Because if our energy partners are not convinced that here is the best place to be, Madam Speaker, there's a unique characteristic with capital. Capital is coward. They're not brave. Capital is not brave. They're very, very coward. And they don't like risk. And anything that creates risk, capital goes, Madam Speaker. Correct. So, Madam Speaker, we have to be careful of our language, our tone, and how we deal with capital. It's not to say that we own something today that a foreign enterprise, foreign direct investment can't find somewhere else. So we need to manage that relationship better, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think this government's turnaround is really a spin around led by Master himself. Madam I don't want to say that. Madam Speaker, in the last few minutes that I have, I want to jump and it is hard to deny that there has been a fair amount of mismanagement prompted by either poor information, poor decision making, a lack of understanding of economics, whatever is the reason. Whatever is the reason for it. All I can tell you today, Madam Speaker, is that I have hundreds of resumes from UTT graduates, UE graduates on my desk, coming every day asking for help, for jobs.
They have it too.
I'm sure they do have that as well. Madam Speaker, there are thousands of low and semi-skilled persons who are desperately looking for some relief, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and that is painful that you have to deal with these things. When they come to your office and they cry, they literally cry. Madam Speaker, businessmen are losing hope. They are seeing, some of small and medium-sized businesses are seeing their life investments shrinking. They are shrinking. And, you know, they say, MP, look, we try everything, We cut costs, we try to be more efficient, we're cutting waste and whatever we need to get it done. But you know what? The confidence in the consumer is not there. That's right. Nobody wants to buy anything, Madam Speaker. So we talk about low inflation, 1%. What? If nobody is buying anything, we're going to get inflation. Nobody's buying, Madam Speaker. You understand? So they are very, very concerned. Madam Speaker, another thing that is not reflective of the numbers that the minister spoke of is that more and more people are flooding to the Social Services Office. And I'm sure the Minister of Social Services would see those numbers. They would see the amount of applications that are coming. Madam Speaker, there is a new ceiling of $1,440, I believe, that has been set to qualify you for certain grants and so on. Madam Speaker, I will tell you this. That, a broad brush was painted across everyone on that. And every day I would write letters asking the minister to reconsider based on circumstances. But thousands of families are in a tailspin because of that. And they are now scrambling to make ends meet. Madam Speaker, I spoke about the challenges my farmers are having. It is not reflective in the numbers that the minister has given. So, Madam Speaker, if this government fails to reverse the path of painting success and wealth as something that is evil and bad, we will be going nowhere very, very fast. I therefore, Madam Speaker, stand in full support of my colleague from Caroni Central as we on this side call on the House to condemn the government for its recklessness and mismanagement of the finances and economy of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Moruga Tableland.
Madam Speaker, good afternoon. Good afternoon to the House. Good afternoon to all members on both sides. Madam Speaker, it pains me tremendously. It pains me tremendously to speak after my friend and schoolmate. We attended the same school. We went, and I know he had a good education at St. Stephen's College, so I know he knows sleight of hand, not slate of hand. He knows that. It pains me to speak after my good friend and colleague, the member for Mayaro. But if I could say one good thing about his presentation, it's probably just one. He did better than his colleague, the member for Caroni Central. Yeah, he did better. It's a very easy and it's a very easy comparison to make, Madam Speaker. At least he appears to live in the same reality, Madam Speaker. He acknowledged that the figures presented by the Minister of Finance, which are substantiated by numerous sources, he at least tacitly acknowledged that the figures were legitimate, which is much better than what the member for Caroni Central did. And I will remove all levity, Madam Speaker. I would contend and I would suggest that one cannot claim to be a patriot and at the same time seek to undermine the institutions that oppose the nation. Madam Speaker, such a thing is counterintuitive and counterproductive. Because you know what, Madam Speaker? Let us suggest that the country goes mad again in 2020 and the UNC comes back into power. Let's assume that kind of mass insanity occurs. The same institutions that they are now undermining, Madam Speaker.
48-1.
Member for Moruga Tableland, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The same institutions, the central bank, the CSO, that are being undermined, that are being disparaged, are the same institutions that any government, regardless of party, would have to rely on. None of us gain by anything by damaging and disparaging our institutions. And the member for Caroni Central, Madam Speaker, who has been in this house since I was in primary school, should know better. And I'm sure he does know better. Madam Speaker, I listened to my colleague from Mayaro. I listened to his assertion that there is a disconnect between the figures presented by the Minister of Finance and the reality on the ground. Madam Speaker, this is a person of some intellect, of some experience, being polite, of some savvy. He acknowledged that we suffered a shock because of falling oil prices and that our economy went into a period of decline because of it. He does not contest the figures that the Minister of Finance is presenting. He accepts them tacitly. Then he should understand that there will be some lag in terms of a time between the figures on paper affecting circumstances on the ground. It's basic economics. It's basic common sense. It's basic. So there is no disconnect. It will happen first on paper, Madam Speaker, then it will start to permeate all sectors and all areas of the economy. That is how this thing works. If you've done basic economics, you have basic common sense, you live on the planet and understand how the world works, you will know that is the reality. So making this hullabaloo about circumstances on paper not affecting the circumstances on the ground is, to be polite, very, very premature. Madam Speaker, there is one thing that the member for Caroni Central said, even in the midst of presenting a motion that talks about recklessness without identifying or defining or explaining any recklessness, that talks about mismanagement without identifying or explaining or ventilating on any aspect or any evidence of mismanagement, there was one kernel in what he said that has some small measure of merit. And it was the way he ended. In fact, he could have probably said, the last thing he said nothing else and sat down would have made more sense. Where the member for Caroni Central, that's he, the member for Caroni Central, the one thing he said that had some modicum, however small, measure of merit, is where he asked the question about whether our economy in the long run is going to be sustainable. And that is a question that we need to dissect. It's a question we need to answer. And I could give the short answer. The short answer is, under the PNM, yes, there is a future. But I could also give the long answer. Madam Speaker, we have spent a long time and a lot of energy talking about the energy industry, talking about the fact that our future, in fact, our present, our reality is tied directly to the energy industry. The Minister of Finance has presented that we have experienced a reversal of economic fortunes mainly because of slight turnarounds or significant turnarounds in the energy sector. Oil production, sale, gas production, sale. And that's a positive in a narrow context. But Madam Speaker, I would contend that going forward, if we also want to talk about economic diversification, Madam Speaker, excuse me, and a sustainable future for this economy and this nation, we need to look very closely at that tight and direct relationship between the energy sector and our economic well-being. Because even though the member for Caroni Central never mentioned it or talked around it, and even though my friend from Mayaro meandered all over the place, there is an issue to be discussed there that we must ventilate if we need to have a sustainable economy in this nation. Madam Speaker, we have a problem, a concern in terms of our economy. This government has addressed it in a very direct way. Anyone who has listened to the Prime Minister talk about economic matters has heard him, or will have heard him if they were really listening, talk about the fact that in the short run, we must remain an economy that is centered on the energy sector. It's a reality we can't escape. But anyone who's also been listening would have heard him talk about the fact that if we stay wedded to what we've done for the last 30 years, the last 50 years, this country has no sustainable future. So we need to look beyond that. And Madam Speaker, I would suggest to you, it might sound absurd, but it's not absurd. I keep suggesting everywhere I go, particularly when I talk to young people, that the most significant resource in this nation is not really oil and gas. It is really our human capital. And Madam Speaker, if we are to do all of the things that the opposition did not do when they were in power, but that we understand we have to do to ensure that we have a future for this nation, I would suggest our salvation must be education. And Madam Speaker, from that little corner, I could talk about many different ways that the things we are doing now in the education ministry and the things that this government is doing in terms of education can help to guarantee this nation a stronger and sustainable economy, a more stable society, and a better future for all of us. And Madam Speaker, I can start by giving you one example. One of the most surprising things to me on entering the Ministry of Education, it's a massive ministry, many different departments, many different sections, doing a number of things. I was actually surprised to learn, Madam Speaker, that the Education Ministry has a very small department, at most probably 10 people, that produces a very interesting document every 4 or 5 years that is, or should be, of great significance to all of us. Madam Speaker, we have a department that produces something called a job survey. What they do very simply is that they look at the economic landscape of the nation, and they determine what are the jobs on offer, what are the jobs that will be offered within that economic landscape in the not too distant future, and what are the jobs that they might be able to project for the future. And Madam Speaker, the quality of data that is produced by this very small department is not something that should be questioned. In fact, they kind of have a gold standard from the CSO. Their data goes directly to the Central Statistical Office. So they produce reliable, good data, verifiable data. Madam Speaker, very interestingly, one of the things that they've highlighted in the documentation that they've produced over the last few years is that all of the growth areas in our economy, all of the potential growth areas in our economy, all of the projected growth areas in our economy, and not just energy-based areas, Madam Speaker. And remember from Miaro bemoaned his perception that we don't focus beyond the energy sector. All of the areas of growth that they have projected, and remember for Caroni, Shogunas East should not be surprised by this, are centered on technical and vocational areas. Now, Madam Speaker, that's very important. It's also very interesting. Because historically and traditionally and now, we still have a problem in this nation in how we perceive technical and vocational education. Madam Speaker, if you talk to educators, even those who are experienced and really ought to know better, many of them give you the perception that technical and vocational education is something for dunce-head children. So children who can't succeed in the traditional academic areas, well, send them to learn a trade. As though somehow learning skills and learning to work with your hands is somehow inferior or, worse yet, disconnected from using your brain. Madam Speaker, the data from our ministry, the data from the Ministry of Planning, which helps us to project these sort of things, even the data from the Ministry of Labor, says to us that these technical and vocational areas where we have said only dunce-head children should go and no one with intelligence should go, these are all traditionally, that is the traditional notion. I'm not taking on that, Parima. Madam Speaker, these are the areas where we need very, very, very critically to invest our resources. Madam Speaker, and we have been doing work in accomplishing that. Madam Speaker, the member for Aruka Moloney is teasing my colleague and friend, the member for Shogunas East, about CVQ, because every time he talks about technical and vocational education, he talks about the CVQ, and you could tell, I mean, even the way he's laughing now, you could tell that he takes a lot of pride in that. And I have no issue with that. The issue of certification is important, significant. But what is neglected, Madam Speaker, and why this kind of thing is very important for our future going forward, for diversification, for having a more evolved economy, is that I've heard him use the word articulation before, but he should know, just like the rest of this House should know, just like the rest of this nation should know, that we have a serious problem when it comes to articulation in this area, Madam Speaker, that we are fixing at the ministry right now. What does that mean, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, any young person in this nation who wants to have a future, wants to be somebody, wants to be Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, Dr. So-and-so, if you're on the grammar school side of our education, they know exactly where they have to go, exactly what they have to do, exactly what qualifications they have to get to reach where they want to go. You want to be a lawyer? You could go to UE, you could go to private institutions, you do your LLB, after that you go to Hugh Wooding, bam, you're a lawyer. You want to be a doctor? You do your CAPE, you get your, if you want to stay locally.
See the relevance to this.
What is this?
Member from Bhoendradatt Tewarie. Please continue.
Madam Speaker, I should be surprised, but I am really not. Madam Speaker, let me take her point up here. If we don't ensure our human capital, we don't have an economy, we don't have a future, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and I just said not too long ago that all of the areas of growth projected by everybody in terms of our economy are in the skills training areas. But to get back on track, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have produced in the technical and vocational areas world-class skilled people. Madam Speaker, we have world-class underwater welders. Madam Speaker, I have friends who work all over the world in the energy industry. We produce world-class scaffolders, world-class riggers, world-class drillers in many ways. If you're talking drilling in the oil industry, Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago is the gold standard for drilling. The problem is, Madam Speaker, we've managed to do that over generations to some extent, in part, by accident and chance. Because, Madam Speaker, if you go to any secondary school now, and you find a student who decides that he or she wants to be a welder, and you ask them, where do you go? What do you do? What level? Well, they know the certification. And you want to become a welder, and you ask them to explain to you the path that they will be using to get where they want to go, they can't tell you. Because no one has ever sat down, taken each of these technical skills that are so critical for our continued development as a nation, and drawn out the articulation for how you get from being a student at the secondary level to either a technician, a craftsman.
This is not about education, motion.
Ah, Lord. Madam Speaker, no one has done it. So no student knows that. So if you become a welder, it's because you bounce from place to place until you find the right place, and then you learn the skill somewhere, and you become a welder. Madam Speaker, at the Ministry of Education right now, we have a working committee that is sitting down and literally drawing out the articulation for every single area that is skills training. Every single area. You want to be a welder, you want to be into instrumentation.
55, please, I draw your attention to 55, repetitious.
Please continue.
Madam Speaker, that is important for our economic development. Now, it's important for economic development going forward. Because, Madam Speaker, at some point in our development, we will understand the fact that we cannot forever and ever, amen, be the producers and sellers of raw products. At some point, we'll have to become a service, an economy that exports services. And Madam Speaker, even if you want to focus narrowly on the energy sector, Madam Speaker, there is a burgeoning oil and gas industry, a major oil and gas industry, Guyana, just south of us. There is no reason why Trinidad and Tobago should not be exporting a suite of services to that industry. There's no reason. And Madam Speaker, I would suggest that our economic future and economic development will hinge on that kind of thing. So Madam Speaker, that's one. The skills training area is tremendously important to our continued development. Madam Speaker, I want to talk about scholarships. Madam Speaker, I have with me here an interim report from a cabinet-appointed committee that was put together to look at the question of scholarships, the whole suite of scholarships that we have at the Ministry of Education. Madam Speaker, we invest tremendous amounts of money in providing scholarships to our young people. Massive amounts of money. Billions of dollars. One of the things I asked when I first got to the ministry is what is the economic return to the nation of these scholarships? It is not just, Madam Speaker, that we have these bright children and we find that we should support them, support their education. If we make the kind of investment that we make in their future with state funding, it's only expected that we get some kind of a return out of it. So I've been asking, Madam Speaker, if anybody could quantify to me the returns that the nation gets, any kind of way, monetary or any otherwise, in terms of that investment. And Madam Speaker, it's very hard to get an answer. So the cabinet appointed this committee to look into this whole thing. And Madam Speaker, we are in the midst now of vetting the report. It has to go back to cabinet. I don't really want to ventilate too much on it.
I hate to do this, but 48.1, it's not relevant to the economic development.
Please continue, Member from Murugal.
That's a good lecture. Madam Speaker, I don't want to get into the details of what has been recommended because cabinet still has to just look at it, dissect it. I'm not taking on them. Cabinet still has to look into it, Madam Speaker, and come to some decision. But if I could give just one overarching concern, Madam Speaker. One, if I had to summarize the most significant recommendation, and it says a lot about how the way that we've done things in this country that is untethered to our economic reality. Madam Speaker, perhaps the most significant, the most important recommendation is that we tie the scholarships to areas of economic development. And that says a lot, Madam Speaker. We've been investing billions of dollars in the futures of our young people, which any responsible state should do. But much of that investment has not been in any direct way tied to our future economic development. I'm not suggesting it's a poor use of money, Madam Speaker. But I am suggesting that if this nation is to have the kind of future we want, we need our best and brightest, and we need to spend money on our best and brightest in a way that ensures that the nation gets the greatest possible return on that investment. And we haven't been doing that. So I'll move on, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the nations that do well in this country, there are nations in this world that have done extremely well without any kind of material resource to extract from the ground. The member for Naparima talks about Singapore ad nauseum without, of course, essentially understanding the point about it. Madam Speaker, we've been very fortunate in terms of our economic existence to have oil and gas. But there are nations in this world that have survived, that have thrived without any kind of natural resource. And I ignore the Singapore and the other obvious examples which we don't really ventilate because, as I have told the member before, Singapore is a command society. What they do here, we cannot do here. That's a police state. Madam Speaker, the ambassador for South Korea visited the ministry to speak with myself and my colleague, Minister Garcia, not so long ago. And they said something interesting to me that I knew to some extent, but I had never really thought about. Madam Speaker, 50 years ago, South Korea was a relatively poor agrarian society. And they made a pivotal decision to invest money in education. And that investment in education has ensured that today, this Samsung phone, which I have in my hand, is a product out of that investment. And that has encouraged us even more, Madam Speaker, to look at the way we educate our young people across the board. Look at the quality of teaching, look at the quality of learning, look at the kind of person we are producing to see if the kind of citizen we produce will have the kind of economic...
55, son, in order, please, repetition about education, please.
Please continue.
Ah, Lord.
This is an abuse of power. Sorry,
And Madam Speaker, it has been, to some extent, eye-opening. Madam Speaker, you take the top student in this nation, or the top students, and this is not meant as a slur to anyone, and you ask them what they want to be, or what they are going to be, what they tend to be, and 9 out of 10 times, Madam Speaker, they're going to tell you they want to be a doctor, they want to be a lawyer. Madam Speaker, there's nothing wrong with that. But Madam Speaker, if our brightest students getting the best that our education system has to offer, if their highest aspiration is to be a doctor or a lawyer, there are some issues of concern there. Madam Speaker, we have to educate our students to be more aspirational. I have been telling children all over this country that they have the right to have a huge dream, regardless of how ridiculous it might sound to all of us. Because that huge dream could be a salvation for all of us. Madam Speaker, we need to ensure that there is less rote learning in our schools and there's more critical thinking, more problem solving.
55, please, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, most economic projections will say for this nation, we will not have a real future unless we start producing a number of entrepreneurs. We have this one industry, oil and gas, Madam Speaker, that is, two things are going to happen to it, one or the other. At some point, it is going to be depleted, or it's going to become obsolete. Madam Speaker, it is either in our lifetime or our children's lifetimes, the oil and gas is going to run out, or the world is going to transform itself, go green, and it will have little value. Madam Speaker, we cannot wait until that happens to start to seriously transform this nation, to start to transform this economy. That will be a cul-de-sac. We will have no future. But Madam Speaker, if we teach our children differently, if we encourage them to be innovative, if we encourage them to be creative, if we encourage them to have ideas, if we encourage them to be entrepreneurs, Madam Speaker, they can help to provide us the kind of...
Member for Muruga-Tigalan, the original speaking time is now spent. Members, it's now 4:29:44. I suggest we take the suspension now and we resume at 5 p.m.